Well, thank you everyone for coming. Today we are doing the future-proofing crime fiction. But first I just wanted to do a quick acknowledgement of country where we're meeting today on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. And I offer my respects also to any First Nation people that might be in the audience today with us. And I think that, as we are kind of blessed with being on a country which does have the oldest continuous living culture in the world, it is a culture built on community, it's built on sharing, and it's built on storytelling. And that all those things are what gets us through the good and the bad times. And that is what we're participating in today, because you might have worked out that I'm not Sue Turnbull. And there's been a slight little hiccup. I'm stepping in to talk about AI. She thrust her list of questions at me. So I really hope that you all have your thinking hats on to help me with some questions later on, because I don't think this flimsy page is enough for an hour. But we'll try and get there, and we'll certainly have some really good conversation along the way. Because with me on the panel, we have three fantastic Australian crime writers. We have Rhys Gard, Margaret Hickey, and Chris Hammer on the end. Now, for those of you who don't know, Rhys is a writer and a chef. Between careers, he studied English and film at the University of New South Wales, and he's worked as a journalist, a marketer, a wine writer, and a restaurateur. He lives in Mudgee. His latest and first novel is 4 Dogs Missing. So I hope you all rush out and grab a copy after this. Next to him is Margaret. Margaret, she is an award-winning author and playwright from Northeast Victoria. She has a PhD in creative writing, so she'll be asking the really tricky questions. She's deeply interested in rural lives and communities, and she is the author of Cutter's End, Stone Town, which won the Danger Press Fiction Award last year, and Broken Bay. And then, last but not least, is Chris Hammer. He is one of Australia's leading Australian crime fiction novelists. He's the author of the internationally best-selling series featuring Martin Scarsden. You can tell that I haven't written this. Scrublands, Silver, Trust. Chris's current award-winning series features the homicide detectives Nell Buchanan and Ivan Lucic, and his latest is The Seven, which you might not have heard of. But again, go out after this, grab a copy, because our authors will be signing and answering questions afterwards. I think it's really interesting that we're gathering today to talk about AI on the day that the Beatles released their final single, generated by AI and separated by a computer, and also kind of having a quick flick through the newspaper. Scarlett Johansson looks like she's going to successfully win her court case against her image being used by AI as a marketing tool. So AI is clearly something that we're going to have to deal with. And as authors, there is some concern that some of our works are being used to teach AI. Sue, in preparation of this panel, asked a popular writing AI program, ChatGPT, to have a look at these authors and prepare something in the style of their voice. I don't know why you're laughing. So, who would like to read their ChatGPT version of their work? All right then. Now I only have one piece of paper, so I will need the paper back. But you are there.
Actually, do you want to go first? Because I need my glasses.
I can go. I've got my glasses.
My goodness.
I think I've got my... I'll go if you want.
Sure.
I've got
Well,
my
there.
glasses. Thank you.
That's yours there.
Thank you. Okay. This is interesting. All right. Oh, God. All right. The relentless Australian sun beat down on the quiet outback town of Red Ridge, its shimmering heat waves distorting the horizon. Nestled between vast stretches of rugged bushland, this isolated community held secrets that would make the devil himself shudder. This is so bad. It was a place where the stark contrast between the arid landscape and the chilling mysteries that lay beneath the surface was a daily reminder that even in the most remote corners of the world, darkness could thrive. As the dusty wind whispered through the eucalyptus trees, an unsolved murder cast a long, haunting shadow over Redridge, and Detective Marcariti knew that the time had come to unearth the truth. I don't like it. Do I write like that?
I hope not. Who wants to go next? I think you're... Yeah, there you
Here's
go.
a vineyard,
Marked
yes.
it out for you.
As the sun dipped below the crimson horizon.
We're
I know
sensing
what
a theme.
ChatGPT thinks of my book. Casting long shadows across the sprawling vineyard, a sinister stillness settled over the Australian countryside. The ancient grapevines, heavy with the promise of a bountiful harvest, whispered secrets in the gentle breeze, their leaves rustling like the pages of an unsolved mystery. In the heart of the Barossa Valley, amid the rows of grapevines and the scent of fermenting fruit, a crime was about to unravel that would shatter the tranquility of this wine-soaked paradise.
Wow. Couldn't even get it and set him mudgy.
We should have.
I think you're on the first page at the bottom. It sort of goes over.
Oh no, that's it.
You're not allowed to edit it. You're supposed to read it cold.
Is that the one you just read?
You know, they're all sort of the same.
They all look very similar
okay.
to me. There's...
We should have mixed them up. The relentless sun. Well, they've got the relentless bit right. The relentless sun hung high in the cloudless sky, casting a harsh and unforgiving light over the parched landscape of the New South Wales outback. The red earth stretched out like a vast canvas, its secrets buried deep beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed. Detective Alex Ryan.
That's your new character.
Bloody hell, that's my new book. Stood alone on the dusty road, the heat shimmering in the distance as he surveyed the crime scene. It was a desolate place where the land told its own stories of hardship and despair, and now it held the darkest secret of all, one that would challenge even the most weathered of outback detectives.
I'm sensing Miles Franklin.
I think we're safe, guys.
So, I mean, you know, we all kind of have a bit of a giggle, but this is what the computers are kind of siphoning out of your work. Are you afraid? Are you...
I'm a bit afraid that all our writing is the same. But no, I'm not afraid because that's awful.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid. That's like I'm an English teacher, and my students always try and use ChatD, and you can tell straight away. No, I'm not afraid of. Are you afraid of that?
Well, I'm afraid it's so clever. It knows what it's being used for, and it's just put that out as a disguise.
Yeah.
Oh no.
No, that does no. That's producing, just churning out verbiage, 100,000 words isn't going to do that, because everyone can do that. I mean, publishers and agents, whatever, are inundated. The manuscripts don't fail because they're too short. They fail because they're not, well, hopefully they're all better than that, but yeah.
Mm. I think it really demonstrates what, I think it's called the blanding. With the more information that goes into the AI, it sort of reduces and it all sort of becomes quite similar. How did you feel about your section, Reece?
Well, I was just thinking. Yeah, I was
on.
just thinking as well. I can't really even, having listened and sort of laughed, I can't really even recall anything of substance. Like, I think it was more just, I could tell as I was reading mine that it's been fed all of these things. Like, here's some sibilance and some alliteration, and let's throw in these words. It feels more like you can sort of feel AI just ticking a box. It's a bit heartless. But yeah, there was nothing in there that was
Having
intriguing.
said that, in my new book, I've written about a shimmering landscape, and I'm going to take it out now. I'm going to take that bit out.
I'm going to have to share,
I
you know,
mean, I
copyright.
think the vineyards were a giveaway, maybe.
Have any of you used any of the programs to have a bit of a play, or?
No. I'm flat out working out spell check.
I had a bit of a play, like when it first came out, and it kept on coming with warnings of, you know, murder is a crime, and so it's like I kept on thinking, oh, I'm clearly just creating a record for myself. But it was very much about the questions that you were feeding this program and sort of what it was spitting out. So I'm disappointed you haven't played with it, because I'm always kind of curious about these things to sort of see, you know, is it really a threat or is it going to be a help?
I'd be really wary of thinking just the first iteration of this technology is its final iteration. I mean, you know, if you were selling horses and buggies when the first motor cars came along, you'd be going, well, that's never going to work. They keep breaking down and they're so expensive and et cetera, et cetera. So really the threat isn't in any way what's there now, it's what's going to happen next.
Mm. And so do you sort of think that, I mean, if people are out there kind of using these sorts of programs, what do you think the stories are going to be that, I mean, we're sort of getting a demonstration of it's going to be kind of rural and in a desert.
But it seems really interesting too that there's no originality, there's no original thought. Like all of it seems to be, you can put in a bit of Margaret Hickey, Chris Hammer and Rhys Gardner, and it will produce something in the style of all three, but there's no AI yet that seems to be able to produce an original thought or, you know, have an idea for something. And then I think if it gets to that level, that's when we probably start to worry.
That's when it starts being like the Terminator, doesn't it? That's when, you know, when that swing, that apocalyptic swing at the start of the Terminator happened. That's when we've all just got to give up, I think.
I think one skill that a lot of successful authors have in common is the ability to self-critique their own work. So the way I work, I really don't know where I'm going until I've got my first draft done, because the story's evolving as I write it. But some authors really push that to the edge, and so they call their first draft their vomit draft. Like they've got to purge themselves, they've got to put it out. But there's no way that they're ever going to submit that for publication. That it's just an exercise to clarify your thoughts, and then you go back and, you know, you try and make the language work, the plot work, you try and make it work, and you might go through many drafts. And I reckon that's the problem with ChatGPT at the moment. It can't self-critique. So even if you ask it to write you a few factual paragraphs, so if Sue had fed in and said, give us a bio of these three writers, there's a good chance that one of them would have had a howler in it. Because somewhere on the internet, you know, one of us, they've confused us with someone else or something like that, and it's got no fact-checking ability to that degree. That's with factual stuff. But with fiction, which is so much more subtle and nuanced, I don't think it's got the faculty to self-critique like that. But that, as I say though, that's now. We don't know about, you know, the distant future. Yeah.
I think it's probably a good point to kind of swing it back to your writing, because all three of you have had, you have a professional writing background before you sort of turn to your crimes. You're sort of journalists, academics. You, I met you 5 minutes ago, Rhys, chef, and you also did some marketing as well. So
some
you're
writing journalism.
used to working with words, and that sort of teaches you how to kind of engage with language over time, and it kind of teaches you, as you say, to critique. So what is your process when you are sort of working on a new project? Are you sort of, I mean, you've kind of highlighted that some people use the vomit draft, the spew draft. I think Elizabeth Coleman said this morning. You know, what is the process?
So my process is, it sounds really messy, but it's not really. But I'm a bit like Chris in that the story evolves as I go. So I have an idea of a landscape that I start off with, and then I write, and then when I wake up the next day, I read the last paragraph that I've written, and then I write on from that, and then I write, and it evolves. And then as the story evolves, I kind of work out, you know, who the killer is or what the story is. So usually I find out who the killer is at about around 62,000 words. And then I go, and then I race back, and I have to then, I have a core group of suspects who it could be, and then as the story evolves, then I go back and have to rework it. So my first draft is very much, you know, the story evolving, but I have to then, when I work out who the culprit, what's happening, then I have to go back and fix it. So it's kind of a mix between the two things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Like, that's the pantser style, really, in a way, isn't it? Like the plotter pantser, like in a way to get to 62,000 and then.
Is that what you're?
No. But I wish I could do that. I think I'd be too anxious. I see, I guess, doing some film stuff at university, we used to do the storyboards. So, but the thing, though, I totally agree, though, in one sense, if you plot things too rigorously, you sort of get bored. And it feels too mundane. So you still do that, but I think you have to surprise yourself along the way as well. So I'll still do, I suppose, an outline, and I sort of know who the killer is or what's going to happen from the beginning. Yeah, I do. So I know at the beginning, but it's sort of like the analogy I use too is like a road trip. Like, you know, you're going from Mudgee to Sydney, but the way that you get there changes. So, and you've got to be open to going with that, because I think if if the writer's bored, the reader's probably going to be bored.
So you have that divide, the plotters and the pantsers. The plotters plot everything out before they start on the narrative. The pantsers, you know, like Marg and me, are sort of starting off and just seeing where the story goes. But that might give you the impression that we're not thinking about plot.
Yeah.
I'll speak for me, not you.
No.
It's and it doesn't mean I'm not plotting. Actually, what it means is I'm constantly plotting. Yeah. As you're writing, where is this taking me? What's going to happen? How can I do? Oh, how can I make this interesting? That sort of thing. So it's not lack of plot. Yeah. It's this constant exploration of plot.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Sorry, I would agree. Mine is similar. Yes.
And I think too, no matter whether if you pants or you plot, you get to the end and, you know, you think it's all done, and then your agent or your publisher says, no, I think the killer needs to be this person, or not necessarily that intense, but, you know, you might get to the end and then you need to rewrite or do something else. So, you know, I think it doesn't matter which road you go down, you're always going to revise as well.
Yeah. It's kind of, I mean, it's, you know, Murray, you brought up the students that are using ChatGPT, and Chris, you sort of, with your news background, we're kind of seeing newspapers being affected by AI-driven stories, and particularly newspapers maybe like Daily Mail or something like that, where they're just kind of siphoning material to kind of regurgitate out. I mean, is that sort of where we're sort of possibly heading with stories?
I mean, in some newspaper reports, it's really obvious, particularly things like match reports in sport. You know, it's got a form and it just feeds the results in. And there's a lot of stock market sort of financial information does that. And you can just tell by the way it's written, it's following a formula and just filling in spaces. But it is evolving. So my wife is an academic, and of course, in more recent years with people submitting essays digitally, you probably have experienced this. So they have this experience, and they've got software that they can run the essays through that will pick up if there's a cut and paste, you know, that they've Googled it and where it's come from. But now with AI, they're finding this problem. So my wife's got a lot of foreign students, and things like Google Translate, the translation apps are using AI, and it's tripping up the software. But of course, it's quite a legitimate thing to do. You know, if you're a Chinese student or something, you come to Australia, you're studying in a second language, to go to say Google Translate to help you translate. You know, if you're researching, archival documents in a foreign language, and you want to translate it in English, so you're going to feed it in one of these. So the old cut and paste, detecting that's one thing, but because AI is inserting itself into these other programs, it's become a real problem for academia.
I mean, I agree. Yeah, it is. But when I left La Trobe, the AI hadn't really begun. We were still working with Turnitin, and that was a problem in itself. But I believe it's much worse now.
Well, Turnitin always picks up your references. You say, you're copying, but it's like, well, yeah, maybe. With the terms of Australian crime writing itself and the stories that we're seeing, we're all familiar with the rural crime, as ChatGPT has demonstrated. We haven't really seen much computer crime stories appearing, or sort of stories involving. There's a couple I can think of with the online stalking, like Ashley Clark and Blunt's and that. But do you think that as this sort of becomes more a technology that people are familiar with, we're going to see more stories about it?
I'm waiting for a story about mushrooms.
Look,
I reckon there'll be a burst of fungi-related crime.
I'll let you into a secret.
I've been asked to write a. Hope it's all right to say this. One of those summer features, and they've got authors, that to share their favourite recipe, and I thought it was a crime. Beef Wellington.
That has to be one of those stories that's just going to keep on giving, because it's so bizarre. We have a couple of true crime journalists in the festival, and yesterday there was a flurry of activity, and I couldn't work out what was going on, but clearly something was happening. And then, we saw the headlines today that she's been arrested and charged.
The computer crime thing is really compelling, though, because that's the world we live in. There is a problem, of course, that your story is likely to date quickly.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's really a concern. And I think that, I think it's a really ripe. Like, for example, at the moment you could do, I think, a really good story about scamming, because scamming has just become so prevalent. Emails, phone texts, all that sort of, wherever you go now, it's just part of the environment. So that would be a good, it'd certainly be a good motivation for murder.
I mean, it's kind of an interesting point, isn't it? Because we often sort of see crime fiction as being something that touches on the issues of the day or that. Is there a role in crime fiction in maybe raising awareness of these sorts of crimes?
There probably is, but I couldn't write anything to raise awareness of something. So there probably is a place for it, but it's
You're
not
not the
somewhere
writer.
I'd go. Yeah, but probably.
Yep.
I think it'll trickle into, if people start using ChatGPT in ways that become criminal, I think it'll pique the curiosity of crime writers, and they'll weave that into their books, definitely. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's got to be an interesting idea, and it's got to appeal to readers and to writers. So if it's wrapped up in something that's kind of saucy and fun, if it's a crime like that, I'm sure it'll definitely start.
A mushroom sauce.
Yeah, exactly.
So you do get, of course, science fiction books, and that's where you find them in the bookstore. But they're crime books that do that. Like there was that TV series, Altered Carbon, that was kind of had a detective and all of that, but it's set in the future. And it was based, I think, originally on, say, a comic strip. So I'm not hardly an expert on science fiction. It's not my sort of go-to area to read. It was a book too? Yeah, so I reckon, can you think of any others like sci-fi books that are essentially crime books?
I've just read a couple recently, and their names escape me, but there's one called, I can look it up.
Okay.
But with a future cop going into a station and trying to work out what's
Yeah, sorry about that. We need to record this. If anyone else wants to contribute, please do, but make sure you get a mic.
Yeah, because the comment was that there is a future cop going into, or a cop going into the future to solve a crime is sort of where we're going with that. But what some of the comments there were sort of made me think of is the role of research in crime fiction. Like, it's so important, you know, we have to get our facts right. And if we're kind of having to deal with an AI engine that's generating the most popular response, like, where do we go for our research now?
Yeah, well, it's interesting though too. I think I'm not sure. I don't think it's really something I wouldn't go to yet. I don't know enough about it. But I think writing crime, I think it's fair to say writing crime as technology progresses too gets harder, because, you know, if you are, not to say it's definitely not easier writing something historically, but obviously considerations around technology need to be, you know, balanced with authenticity, you know, because police have access to phone records, data pings with towers. There's so much in the current day that we still need to research and consider, and you need to ask police about, you know, would the technology trip up the murderer? Because it might not have been a factor 100 years ago, but it is today. So I think you were already kind of well versed in researching and finding out how technology impacts crime. But yeah,
the invention of mobile phones were really bad for crime writing, weren't they? Because everyone, the phone pings, the records, you being able to text someone, take photos. That's why I like rural crime though, because there's so many black spots.
Yeah.
There's so many where I there's like, it's good.
When I was first writing my first book, Scrublands, there were these plot lines. There's a journalist, Martin Scars, and in the plot line, the newspapers come out every day and he's reading them. But while I was writing it, I was working for the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age, and they were seriously considering closing the Monday to Friday newspapers and just going purely digital. And they really explored it. In the end, they worked out that that was a bad idea, and the papers have kept going. But I was thinking, oh no, by the time my book comes out, there won't be any Monday, Friday papers. So I went, oh, well, the solution's easy. I'll just set the book 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I was off doing that book, The River, so travelling through this drought-stricken land. And then I was going, and it's really recent. So I was travelling around 2008, 2009. I think I was setting the book in 2013, but it was like, were there smartphones? Were there iPads? Were there this? And I had the big black hole for mobile phones, because back then that was really the case out there. Anyway, then they made the decision not to close the paper, so I brought it back to the present. And then I had to oh no, how do I... And so I had, the telephone tower had fallen over or something, and because it wasn't a marginal electorate, the black hole wasn't filled in, you know. So it was like, oh God. And the editor, you know, I've got him walking into a darkened bar, and, you know, he's wishing he had a torch, and the editor's going, why isn't he using his phone? I'm going, oh God, that was the last draft. But for all that, yeah, and, you know, in my book Silver, there's a beach that's over a ridge and there's no mobile phone reception. But on the other side, so that's a problem. But just think of the gift of the relatively new technology of DNA, what that's given us. You can do because you can discover things through DNA. You know, so that's a bit of a gift, I think, that technology.
You always get the DNA results back in your books 24 hours after instead of like 5 years. And
no, they've got mobile sequences now. They can do it on the spot.
I'll have to change my book.
Set your book 10 years ago.
I had to do that too. My characters were... I had to change them so that it was 10 years earlier, and then I was getting so confused with timelines that one of my editors said, now the son is older than his mother or something, and I was going, oh my God, it was like The Bold and the Beautiful, like everyone was sort of getting together, and oh God. But
if only there was a computer to keep track of that. So, I mean, where do we think we kind of touched on it very early, that, you know, where is this going to go? Do you think this is going to be something that, you know, we're going to be relying on? Is this like when Word was introduced and people were still going, oh, I'm going to use my typewriter, I'm not going to go onto this fancy computer thing? Is this the future that crime writers have to look forward to, where we're going to be using a computer to tell us a story?
The stories that resonate with readers are stories about, at the end of the day, are stories about people and the emotional connection. And that's true for crime fiction as it is in other types of fiction. And, you know, a lot of the most compelling non-fiction is about people, you know, biography or whatever. So that human connection and what's going to resonate with someone else, that's going to be a big task, I think, for you know, AI to learn.
I think the hard thing too, like you read Margaret Hickey and Chris Hammer, and their plots are great and their characters are great, but what makes them some of the best crime writers in Australia is their voice. It's a very unique kind of style and a voice that carries the reader through from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
And it's sort of even unclassifiable. You can't really give AI Chris Hammer's voice. It's just him, you know. So I think until AI can even contemplate getting that, it's going to have no hope.
And it's almost not even worth worrying about, because we've just got to toil on, get up and write every day, try and do a bit, try to do the best we can, try publish the best we can. You know, if you know, we can only keep trying, can't we? If we worry about that, I think then that's when we will be in trouble.
Also, there's the other side of it that happens after we've written the books, and that's all the marketing and everything like that. Readers are very loyal to authors because, you know, you walk into the bookstore and there's 10,000 books, and oh God, which one am I going to read? And you're looking at blurbs, and then you say, you go, oh, Riscard, I read, you know, Four Dogs Missing. I like him. So what are publishers going to do? Are they going to invent authors? If readers really follow authors, how do you market something that's just sort of come at the press of a button? And what happens when you get called out for it?
Because that's what we like about authors, isn't it? It's that the way that they've connected, you know, odd ideas together or strung sort of.
Or people could embrace it, and we're sitting here in 10 years without a job. But I don't think so.
No.
I think we're safe.
I think that was where Sue was going with these questions.
We're sitting in home and we've got avatars here.
Well, I mean, the question that she has here is, what does the future look like for you in a world of AI? Is it going to be more of the same, more experimental, or completely changed?
Well, that's an excellent question. I don't know. I know what I'll be doing. I'll be trying to keep writing and keep evolving and hopefully getting better. You know, and that really doesn't change.
I think one thing that is really interesting as well is, I can't speak for the future of AI, but for right now, what it does is it really highlights the people who do take writing as a craft seriously. It gives them it makes them feel more important, because you read, like I read someone, they'd recruited AI to write a job advertisement, and it was absolute rubbish. The employer wanted it taken down straight away, was cranky. Yep. It was just this laughable advert. And I think, you know, if kids are going to try and plagiarise using AI, they're writing, I think it's, at the moment, if anything, it's more damaging to the craft of writing than it is beneficial. And I think, if anything, it just proves and shows that, you know, people who take writing seriously and commit to the craft, it's more important to do that than entertain it.
And in a small way, I mean, I know it's not the same scale, but there's always been plagiarism, hasn't there? There's always been, you know, people say Shakespeare didn't write. Well, there's always, you know, someone else is writing for. So there's always been that question of who's writing and who's legitimately the author. This is just a different phase. You know, I had a Year 9 student once submit for his poetry this beautiful poem. He said he'd stayed up all night writing it. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? You know, I said, this is the most beautiful piece of poetry, Curtis. You know, we're going to have to. So I think this is something humans have grappled with for a long time.
There is this other issue, of course, about AI, and that is the plagiarism and intellectual property issue, which is there now, which is they're training AI by feeding in the works of authors or of musicians or of visual artists, and that's essentially theft, right? They should be, and of course this is part of the writers' strike being in the US, all of that. So that's a current issue, and that's a real issue, and it's an absolutely legitimate issue that you should not just be able to take other people's work and do what you like with it.
Yeah. Well, do you have any questions from the floor? I remember I asked you to start thinking.
And please wait for the mic.
Yeah, because we are recording it for the. I think we've got one right in the centre there.
Thank you. Just on that point that you raised, I've had that discussion with my partner who's a lawyer, and he had a different perspective, which worried me actually. He said, what's the difference between a machine reading 100 books, absorbing that information and churning something out different, like a combination? What's the difference if a person did that over their lifetime and read 100 books? They produce their own book, which is a synthesis of everything they've ever learned and read. He said, tell me what the difference is there. And that really worried me.
Look, let me think it. You have a go, I think it's right.
Well, look, maybe the difference is intent. So intent. So if that person's read 100 books over their lifetime, they have these ideas, then they create something unique out of perhaps that's somehow born from some of those ideas with the purpose of publishing their own book. Whereas I doubt AI is ever going to do that for something kind of noble, possibly for no payment or no reward. I think mainly AI it would be for some purpose like plagiarising, so maybe intent.
And the other aspect is if someone's read all of our books and is doing that, they've paid for our books. They've either bought the books, they've borrowed a book that someone else has paid for, or they've got it from a library that has paid for and is paying, and we're getting paid through ELR and whatever. So at some point, someone has paid for our work, whereas none of these AI programs are paying people. If they came and said, we want to feed stuff in, that'd be a different matter.
And there was that lawyer that got in trouble for using AI to generate previous cases that didn't exist. So maybe you could fire that back at you. Do we have another question? Yep.
Thank you. I was reading about a bunch of novels that have been written by or co-written with AI. One of them was called Death of an Author. And I was reading about how Italo Calvino, Italian writer back in the, 30s, 40s, something like that, he dreamed of a machine that would churn out books and relieve writers of having to write. And he celebrated that because it was a sort of abstract idea that books are created by readers reading them, and we all create a book each time we read a book. And he was like, this is a wonderful thing, we don't have to write anymore, there's no labour. So I'm curious, if you didn't have to write anymore, you could rest on the machine and you could just be readers, and possibly there was a universal basic income, so you had a source of income, would you give up writing and let the machines do it?
No. Because I love doing it. And I do well, my books sell all, but if they didn't, I'd still do it. In fact, that's how I came to write Scrublands. I'd written 2 non-fiction books that were published, were well received, but didn't sell anything, made no money. I would have lost money by writing those books. So would I continue writing? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And how many of us have had 30,000 rejections before we've had any sort of success? Absolutely. Every time I sit down to write, I think this is a privilege and this is a joy. It's an absolute joy. I doubt AI will ever be able to, have anything like that. So, no.
I agree with both, and we'll add as well, I think as much as the book is for the reader, it's also a conversation between the writer and the reader, really importantly, because you can, you take in their voice and you laugh, and it's almost like it's almost like you're in a dialogue at times, I suppose, as a reader. So the author and the person who's creating that story is still really paramount, I think.
What about flipping that though? Would you use AI as an editor?
No, because I love my editor. I have great editors. No, I wouldn't. Why would you? I can't think of why you would do that.
Well, if the tool was there, maybe a little bit more advanced than what it is.
I think it's really
I
hard
wouldn't
too,
trust
because
it.
even, spell check, as Chris is just learning, is his words at the beginning. It's really hard sometimes, even though it's sort of, I suppose, set on rules and assumptions. So you can write a sentence that might sound really good, but, technically it's wrong. So I think that there's going to be those issues where, and I remember doing that at uni in creative writing, it might have been a Hilary Mantel or a Tim Winton, and you had to type out one of their, and it was a similar sort of discussion to this, like using spell check and making sure you can edit your own work and the importance of editing. And some books that have won, the Man Booker and the Miles Franklin, if you type in their sentences, you get so many red lines, green lines, like, technically they're not correct, but they're beautiful sentences.
Yeah.
It also sort of implicit in that question is a bit of it sort of disrespects, in a sense, the level of talent and insight of editors. It's almost like the author's here and the editor is just a more functional process that may be more easily automated. I don't think that's true. Because an editor will work on all sorts of different levels, from the entire kind of shape to the pace to the language to the authenticity of motivation. They're working on multiple levels, and I reckon my editors have got a lot more talent and insight than I do, to be honest.
It's a
And experience.
Because their idea, because really what they do is they illuminate your work, don't they? And I don't know how an AI could have that skill.
Yeah, it's that creative conversation, hopefully lifting it to the next level.
Yeah, and I think, the point that you made at the start, Andy, about it has effect of flattening everything, whereas editors do the opposite. They lift things up and contrast things and all the rest, yeah.
Do we have another question from a couple down the back there? Or in the front, sorry?
So in
then we'll
relation
go-
to something that you said, Chris, with regards to have we ever read a book that's in relation to AI, I've read a book by J.D. Robb, and she's a futuristic cop, and her partner is in charge of the security for the whole of the planets, multiple, so it's set quite a far ahead. And he uses AI to help her solve most of her cases. Have you ever heard of her, or what do you think of that sort of use of AI?
Look, I think all organisations, commercial and government, will be looking to AI as a way to be more efficient, to pay less people, to automate things. So all sort of organisations are doing that now already. So to think that that would happen in the future, for example, scanning partial DNA, why wouldn't you automate that? And if you can have some machine learning that, why wouldn't you do it? So look, that sounds like a really legitimate idea.
Yeah, we've got two, and then we'll come back to you.
The problem is with the name of artificial intelligence, because it kind of misrepresents completely that these machines are intelligent. They're not intelligent at all. They're averaging machines. They don't have an original thought. And Reece said, he was talking about creatives. We're the creatives. These machines are not creative at all, and they won't be creative until they're conscious, and that's going to be a long way away. I don't think we need to be afraid that they're going to be conscious and be creative at any time in the near future, potentially a long time away. The human brain is this extraordinary machine that's got, the last time I heard, 1.5 petabytes of data in it, which is more than all the information currently on the internet in every one of our brains. The machines are a long way away from that. Maybe 10, 20 years' time. I think we've got a career ahead of us for a while yet.
A few more bestsellers.
So I'm happy with 10 or 20 years. Don't know about Reece. He's really young.
We've got a we've got a question online over Zoom. It is from Honey Van Rijsdijk. Do your international readers relate differently to your books than your Australian readers? And if so, how?
I think you're the only one of us that can speak to that, Chris.
I don't know. I haven't got enough feedback from international readers to know. There's certainly an appetite for Australian crime, and I think particularly for rural crime, and I think it's because they see Australia as different or exotic. You know, the mean streets of King's Cross and St Kilda probably don't have the same appeal because they know that, whereas I think maybe that's some of the appeal. I'm not sure about, say, the Australian vernacular or how they react to that, whether they like it or they don't. I just don't know. It's a great question, though.
Yeah, it's one that really probably needs a bit more thinking. Might come back to that question after we sort of thought about it a bit more. But Lorraine down the back, you've got a question.
Hello, I'm Lorraine Peck. I'm a crime writer, and I'm sitting amongst a whole group of crime writers.
Yeah, if you want to know the future of crime writing, it's sitting in that series there.
And what I want to know is, let's put AI aside for a minute, okay? I want to know what you think are the other threats to our livelihood as crime writers. Where do you think the threats are going to come for you? You know, because you're all successful crime writers. I want to know where you see the threats to our livelihoods going forward.
Well, I think one thing, probably writers, publishers are still really fighting for, you know, it's still really hard to make a living from writing in Australia. You know, obviously there are bestsellers, but a lot of writers, you know, the income for the amount of work put in isn't a lot. So I think that's still the good fight, you know, trying to secure representation and payment for writers. That's what's happening in America with the writing strike. It's on a couple of fronts with technology, but also fair pay and, actually respecting creatives and paying people in the industry what they're worth. And I think, you know, it's not a complaint, but I think that's still something that is a work in progress. Like, I think there can still be a lot more work done to sort of benefit creatives across all industries, not just writing, but those who have original thoughts and create work and put it out there. I still think there's a lot we can do to support them.
I mean, I can't really think of any threats. Maybe a threat would be like if Leanne Moriarty published hers on the same day as one of my books came out. I'd feel threatened by that. But I don't feel any sort of threats. I don't think, or I don't think about them. Maybe I should, Lorraine, but I sort of don't go there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd flip the question and answer that I'm actually quite optimistic. That, yeah, there's threats there. I mean, right at the moment, just the costs of everything from paper to ink to petrol to whatever, that's a short-term thing. Books have proven themselves to be so resilient. You know, there are new bookstores opening. You know, a few years ago, e-books were going to be the end, not of books, but of bookstores. And yet there's new bookstores opening. You know, a lot of regional towns are getting a bookstore for the first time, or the first time in a long time. And I think it's because the power, it goes to what Reese was saying about the communication between the author and the reader, that the reader is part of the creative process. You're imagining the story in your own mind. It's why the reaction to books can be so very different. So you think at the moment there's this huge swag of, say, crime stories on television, you know, on things like Netflix, and it's really appealing because you can binge watch them, right? Or you can watch them when you like, rather than that appointment TV. You know, you miss one episode on a Sunday night and you're stuffed, sort of thing. So you think, well, that's a threat, but it hasn't proved to be a threat at all. If anything, there seems to be this one feeds off the other. People like, say, the crime stories, and they read more as well as watch more.
And that's so good, because we always talk about the crime community in Australia. It's such a great supportive community, so we all really celebrate each other's success. So, you know, I figure if one of us is doing really well, it's good for everyone. So, yeah, I think less than threat.
Why don't we had a question here, waiting very patiently.
Yep, thank you. So my question is, we're talking about AI in the context of like people using it, but my question is here, if the AI is really poorly trained and it's like does damage in like one of your stories or something, who would be like, would you say the users are responsible, the company employing it's responsible, or the AI itself is responsible?
Are you asking for a legal opinion?
I'm asking,
sorry, what's it?
I really want to, I'm thinking like it'd be a really interesting question to explore, just like from a character perspective.
I know there's already an issue, say, with plagiarism. So you'll get companies that will scan books, you know, our existing books, and then, say, sell them online for you know, next to nothing. So we as authors cannot police that. But I think publishers do, or groups of publishers, to make sure that things aren't stolen. So that's an existing, you know, you get an e-book and you just sort of somehow scan it so you can give it out for free, sort of thing. So that, I think that's a big issue with publishers, and it's almost like I think it will be an extension of that, but we're probably the wrong people to answer that.
Another question?
Yeah, I also think that readers have a duty with regards to protecting that. Because if someone's going to offer me a freebie book, and I've got the opportunity because I know that's a copied one, or I can get one, an e-book or a hard copy book, I think I have a duty to protect your work and pay the extra bucks and buy it, not go and get the cheap copy. Because, you know,
We like you. You're good.
But no, I'm the same. I'm going to always buy a book written by an author. I mean, you can't have a beer with a computer, right?
And it's the same too with like, I prefer to read a tangible physical book, but sometimes, you know, if you need to read things on your phone or online or something, if I love a book, if I've had to read it on the plane or somewhere, and I love it, I'm going straight to my local bookshop to buy the physical copy, because then if I meet the author, I can get them to sign it, or, you know, it's there, it's part of your collection, it's all that lovely stuff. So I think basically everything we've discussed, AI is not in there because it's all about, you know, readers and writers, that connection, meeting at events, you know, the tangible physical books, all that stuff. It's still prevalent, and it's just continuing to defy, you know, all of these other threats.
And I've probably got time for one more question. I think you have your hand up.
Yeah. Talking to someone this morning about writing your book in the past, and you were talking earlier about forensics and dating technology, like, you know, facial recognition with Facebook and all of that sort of thing. I think Shelley Burr does that in Wake, and she was worried it was going to date before a book came out. But if you're writing, say, 20 years ago, and you're trying to figure out what stage was DNA technology at that date, what am I allowed to do, what am I not allowed to do, have any of you considered going to ChatGPT to ask those questions as part of your research, like actually using it to help you? Because I'm just wondering, I've not used it myself, but I'm now wondering if that might be a utility.
I think the same thing applies with research as it does with us, like actually reading a book, in that if you've got a question, it's best to ask a person. That's what I still do. But, you know, if you've got something about police, you ask police, or, you know, diving, you ask someone who's a specialist in diving. It's just, yeah, I'm sure ChatGPT will give you a great answer, but sometimes as writers too, you're looking for those, to ask those tricky questions and getting the reactions from humans.
Yeah, I mean, I use Google and Wikipedia and things like that quite a bit, just to sort of check some of those dates. It goes to the source and how reliable the source is. If you Google something and it puts you into an authoritative source, you're going to believe that more than when it refers you to some sort of conspiracy website or something something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think as a research tool, if it proves reliable, then yeah, I think you'd use it.
So I think what we're saying is the question there.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe a question or comment, whatever the panel thinks, but picking up the theme of positivity, sort of looking at writing as positive or the connection between the writer and the reader. I can't see technology replacing the human experience, which is what authors are about. And the way the AI combs data about all of you, all the writers, is all about the past. Like this afternoon, you might be affected by a baby crying or you see a car accident and it affects you in a certain way. And you write about that. And how on earth can AI replace that?
Agree.
It's very true. I mean, it is that what we're looking for when we're readers is that human connection. And the same with the research, you're kind of searching for that sort of...
Just to that point, and I think you did right, but to illuminate it, if Benjamin Stevenson had sat on this panel a couple of years ago, his first two books are in a way more like standard crime books. There's no way that AI would have then predicted that he's going to do these, you know, self-referential, very funny, you know, kind of meta crime books. He's changed, and we may all change. Well, hopefully we'll all change. I mean, no one wants to write the same book twice, right? So I think that's a good point.
Have you told them you're releasing an erotic romance next year, Chris?
It's good. The sun was beating down. Relentlessly. He.
Well, I think we've pretty much come to the end. For those of you who know Sue Turnbull, you know that she loves her Nordic noir, and her final thing that she played with ChatGPT was an Australian Nordic noir. And this is what the computer spat out for that. In a dimly lit alleyway of Sydney, where the searing sun seldom penetrates the shadows, Detective James O'Sullivan found himself haunted by the unforgiving spectre of the past. As the frigid gusts of an unseasonably cold wind cut through the urban canyons, he trudged through a labyrinth of secrets that had long festered beneath the city's dazzling veneer. The pervasive sense of impending darkness was not foreign to this seasoned detective, for beneath the sunburnt land of Australia, he knew lay a tapestry of crimes as chilling and unforgiving as the glaciers of the Nordic lands.
We're safe, guys.
Thank you very much. Please put your hands up. And remember that both Chris, Margaret and Reese will be signing books at the bookshop. Please go and buy them. Thank them for appearing on this crazy panel, and I hope that you at least have thought about where AI might be taking us in the future. Thank you.